Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
So today, we're diving into a really specific moment in time, June 14th, 2025.
Right. And our source material here is, well, it's quite narrow, actually. It's just the episode description for the Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell podcast from that exact day.
Exactly. So think of it like a snapshot. What did one particular news show choose to focus on right then?
Yeah, and our mission, I guess, is to look at those topics listed and try to, figure out the deeper story. What were the key issues? Why these topics on that day?
Right. So we know from the description we'll be touching on some domestic politics, social actions, international stuff, even border policy. A real mix.
A very busy news day, apparently.
Seems like it. So where do we start? The description flags some kind of domestic tension early on.
It does. It points specifically to growing outrage. That's the term used.
Okay. Outrage about what?
About the handcuffing of Senator Alex Padilla. The description highlighted this as a leading topic.
Wow, okay. A sitting U.S. senator being handcuffed.
Yeah.
That's definitely going to cause outrage.
Absolutely. It's unusual, to say the least. And calling the reaction growing outrage, it signals this wasn't just, a procedural hiccup.
No, sounds like it hit a nerve.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe questions about why it happened, the politics behind it.
Exactly. That kind of incident involving a major political figure, it instantly becomes a flashpoint. It grabs headlines.
Makes sense it would lead the broadcast then.
For sure. And then, moving from that specific incident, the description also points to something much broader. Nationwide protests.
Ah, yes, the No Kings protests. I saw that. And the scale mentioned was huge, right? Over 2,000 cities.
Yeah, over 2,000 cities. That number really jumps out. When you're anticipating protests on that kind of scale, well, it suggests significant, widespread discontent.
No Kings. What do you think that implies?
Well, the description doesn't spell it out, but the name itself, No Kings, it strongly suggests, themes of anti-authoritarianism, maybe resisting perceived overreach of power, could be tied to all sorts of political or social issues boiling up at the time.
And the timing was noted as Saturday, which lines up with June 14th, 2025, if that was a Saturday. So it was immediate, happening now.
Exactly. So you've got this specific political firestorm with the senator.
Right.
And then layered on top, the whole country seemingly bracing for these massive, potentially disruptive protests. It paints a picture of a pretty tense domestic situation.
Definitely intense. Okay, so that's the domestic side covered in this snapshot. But there was international news, too.
Yes, a major international event was also listed. Iran launching retaliatory missiles into Israel.
Retaliatory. That word seems key.
It is key. It tells you this wasn't the start of something, but a response. It implies a cycle of action, and reaction was already underway in, a very volatile part of the world.
So the broadcast was covering an active, ongoing conflict.
Seems so. Even without the prior context in the description, just including that item signals its importance. A live, developing international crisis.
Okay, so wow. Within this one day's focus, specific political outrage, potential mass protests, and an active international military exchange. That's a lot.
It really is. It shows how global events and domestic issues can all be colliding in the news cycle simultaneously. You can't really separate them sometimes.
And there was one more piece mentioned in the description, was there? Something about borders.
Right. Closer to home, but still with that policy angle. It mentioned disruption to life on the U.S. Canada border.
The Canada border. That's interesting.
It is. Often the focus is elsewhere. And this disruption was specifically attributed to Trump policies from a previous administration still having effects.
So this suggests real-world consequences, right? Not just policy debates in Washington, but things actually impacting people's daily lives. Trade, maybe, travel, communities.
Precisely. It hints that the broadcast likely explored how these policies were causing problems. What were the tangible impacts being felt by people right there on the border? It connects that policy discussion directly to lived experience.
Yeah, adds another dimension. You've got the high-level politics, the social movements, the international conflict, and then this very grounded impact of policy.
It's a really interesting mix of scales and types of news.
And the description even told us who was there to talk about it all. The guests.
Ah, yes. It listed the guests joining Ali Velshi for that discussion. Gessen, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, David Rothkopf, Sylvie Boudreau, and Representative Becca Balint.
Okay, so looking at that list, Gessen, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, they often bring historical or authoritarianism expertise. David Rothkopf, international relations, foreign policy, Sylvie Boudreau, maybe the Canadian border connection, and Representative Balint, a voice from Congress.
Exactly. That lineup suggests they were aiming for a really comprehensive discussion, bringing in historical context, geopolitical analysis, maybe that specific border perspective, and someone right in the thick of U.S. politics.
It gives you a clue about how they might have tried to connect these seemingly disparate dots, using those different expert lenses.
Yeah, the choice of guests really hints at the depth and the angles they were probably exploring to make sense of it all on that particular day.
So let's just recap this snapshot we got from June 14th, 2025, based only on these highlighted topics.
Okay, we had that specific incident sparking outrage, Senator Padilla being handcuffed.
Right. Then the anticipation of huge, nationwide No Kings protests.
Yeah.
Very widespread social action.
Then internationally, an active military event, Iran's retaliatory missile strike into Israel.
And finally, the reported real-world disruption on the U.S. Canada border linked back to specific policies.
Yeah, it's quite a confluence. Domestic political drama, mass social movement potential, international conflict, and policy impacts all jostling for attention on the same day's broadcast.
What really stands out to me looking at it this way is just the sheer simultaneity of it all. How all these different spheres, the political, the social, the international, the policy sphere, are all active and unfolding at the very same time.
Absolutely. And maybe that leads to a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on.
Okay.
When you encounter a day's news, maybe like this snapshot, with all these different kinds of events presented together, how does seeing them side by side actually shape your picture of what's happening? Do you start to see connections between, say, domestic unrest and international tensions?
Yeah.
Or between political actions and policy impacts, even if the report doesn't explicitly draw them? How does that collective view influence your understanding of that moment in time?